Hi, I'm Dr. Ricky Little, Professor of Music at Union College, and this is part 2 of Who's Rocking the House, Music of the World and the World of the Church. In part 1, we looked at the heathen party the children of Israel had at Mount Sinai, and we looked at the power of music on man. We considered God's original purpose for music, the work of composers in shaping music, and we will continue with that with an analytical study of the composer John Philip Sousa. John Philip Sousa was an American composer who had a concept, a goal, and a design for his music. He wanted people to move and feel good. That was it. In 1892, he established a U.S. military Marine band and wrote marches for it. The harmony, he said, must be clear-cut, and the melody must appeal to the musical and non-musical alike. He accomplished his goal with such marches as The Stars and Stripes Forever, and became internationally famous because his music epitomized the youthful optimism of America, making the maximum appeal to body and nerves and the minimum to head and heart. He said that his compositions were music for the feet instead of the head. It should make a man with a wooden leg step out. This man had a specific design and function for his music. His instrument of communication was the military band, used much in the open air, with strong brass instruments, drums playing strict, lively rhythms, the cymbals for accent and excitement, and the woodwinds for color. There were no words to the music, but the people got the message. The harmony was clear-cut in major keys, which communicated optimism, and the melody was immediately appealing to all. So by the time he finished, Mr. Sousa had everybody marching and feeling good. You can imagine what would happen if we took this kind of music and used it in the church for worship. No one would be able to contemplate high and lofty themes or hear the still small voice of the Holy Spirit. No one would be drawn by the music to look inward and upward in a spirit of reverence. For such music was not designed to stimulate deep heart-searching, nor the contemplation of spiritual things. It was not designed to uplift the holy name of God in the spirit of adoration, praise, and thanksgiving. For even if we put sacred words to the march, no one would pay attention to the message. The words would get lost in the excitement of the music. Not to mention the fact that the words would not complement the frivolous message of the music, seeing that the theme of God's salvation for a dying world has little to do with music meant for the feet and not the heart. Let's look at the opposite. Let's say you go into the city and take ownership of the most successful disco in town. But instead of playing rap, funk, hip-hop, R&B, or country, which were designed mainly for the feet, fun, dancing, and sentimental, infatuous intimacy, you play hymns, art songs in foreign languages and symphonic works, which were designed more for the intellect and the heart. What would happen to your business? That's right. You would find that your disco had become a fiasco because the music was out of place. It would not fulfill the wants and demands of those who came to dance, party, drink, and pick up a one-night stand. You would literally kill the atmosphere and make your customers angry. A certain law of appropriateness, common sense, and judgment applies here. Before we summarize our disco analogy, let me introduce a couple of music concepts that arose in the classical music world. In the 18th and 17th centuries, composers developed the concept of program music. And later in the 19th century, the idea of absolute music was born. Program music is instrumental music that is based on a specific narrative, and as such is intended to evoke extra musical ideas or images in the mind of the listener. Music intended to represent or illustrate something else. Absolute music, on the other hand, is music without subject. It is music purely for the sake of music, art for art's sake. Instrumental music composed purely as music and not intended to represent or illustrate something else. Then there is functional music, and this is my own term. Music designed to fulfill or support a specific function or activity. So what type of music do they play in the disco or the clubs? Program, absolute, or functional? Now, what are the principles that we learned from our disco analogy in consideration of Mr. Sousa's music? Number one, music can be tailor-made to fit a function, express a feeling or mood, and motivate people to immediate emotional and physical action without much thought. Two, all music is not appropriate for all occasions. It can serve one function perfectly and fail at another function miserably. But it must be said that sometimes music which was designed for one purpose can be successfully used for another when it fits the demands of the occasion. Three, some music appeals to the physical more than it does to the intellectual or spiritual, and vice versa. The next, music without words has a message which can be understood by humans, be they musically literate or illiterate. Five, when trying to adapt words to music, one must consider that the message in the music and the message of the words may not always complement each other nor be appropriate. Six, in our society, music is strongly associated with certain types of activities and will take its reputation with it. This particular truth can be seen clearly if we take rock and roll as an example. This form of music, from the very beginning, has been associated with sex or sexual impurity. And it has been, for many years, the same. Even its name, rock and roll, originally referred to the male and female genitalia, and that during the act of intercourse. Through its lyrics and visual images seen in videos and through the suggestive nature of the music itself, it has become fairly impossible to separate rock and sex. It has also become heavily associated with drugs, violence, and rebellion, just like rap music. So when someone thinks about rock and roll in our society, the direct association with these things will automatically be made. Furthermore, when composers write their music to embrace an immoral position on issues like sex, it becomes a living vehicle, as it were, to shape and promote immoral thoughts and behavior. It becomes a persona of immorality whose influence can be long-lasting and difficult to erase, especially when one considers that millions of copies of these songs are sold worldwide and are repeatedly played thousands of times in the minds of billions of people over the years. Two of the songs that I distinctly remember receiving constant airplay over the radio when I was a kid in the early 70s was Love the One You're With and Me and Mrs. Jones. One is considered folk rock and the other R&B. See if you can figure out the lessons of morality or immorality that they teach. Love the one you're with. If you're down and confused and you don't remember who you're talking to, concentration slips away because your baby is so far away. Well, there's a rose in a fisted glove, and the eagle flies with the dove. And if you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. Don't be angry. Don't be sad. Don't sit crying over good times you had. There's a girl right next to you, and she's just waiting for something to do. And there's a rose in the fisted glove, and the eagle flies with the dove. And if you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. Turn your heartache right into joy. She's a girl and you're a boy. So get it together, make it nice. You ain't gonna need any more advice. And there's a rose in the fisted glove, and the eagle flies with the dove. And if you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. The immoral messages here are, number one, have sex with the closest female sitting next to you, regardless of who you are supposed to be in love with. Number two, don't exercise any self-control if you're lonely. 3, it's okay to hurt the one you love, because being faithful to the one you love is not important. 4, don't abstain from fornication and adultery. Just do it. This song reached number 14 on the U.S. Hot 100 chart, which we can assume means that the buying public really embraced the message of the song. The second song is classified as R&B, but it makes the same point. And since rock and R&B are siblings, it's all in the same family. Me and Mrs. Jones, we got a thing going on. We both know that it's wrong, but it's much too strong to let it go now. We meet every day at the same cafe, 6:30, and no one knows she'll be there. Holding hands, making all kinds of plans, while the jukebox plays our favorite songs. Me and Mrs. Jones, we got a thing going on. We both know that it's wrong, but it's much too strong to let it go now. We gotta be extra careful that we don't build our hopes up so high, because she's got her own obligations, and so do I. Me and Mrs. Jones, we got a thing going on. We both know that it's wrong, but it's much too strong to let it go now. Well, it's time for us to be leaving. It hurts so much. It hurts so much inside. Now she'll go her way and I'll go mine. Tomorrow we'll meet, the same place, the same time. Me and Mrs. Jones, we got a thing going on. We both know that it's wrong, but it's much too strong to let it go now. Now, what are the messages in this song? Number 1, cheating on your spouse in adultery is okay. 2, fidelity to your spouse means nothing. 3, don't fight the feeling or conviction to stop the relationship. 4, the strong feelings you have for Mrs. Jones are of more value than the ones you have for your wife. 5, even though you are both convicted and convinced that it is immoral, don't listen to that. Keep sinning. 6, the relationship is much more important than your marriage vows, and your family. And sneaking around participating in a secret rendezvous is exciting. This song reached number 1 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 and was number 1 on Billboard's R&B singles chart. 50 years ago, this was the moral message people were being sold, and they loved it. Musicians today are still singing about Mrs. Jones and the girl right next to you, but they now sing about them in far more graphic details, which I will spare you. Because of these things and others, many will agree that rock and roll is not exactly healthy musical food for the Christian, and that it definitely has a bad reputation from a biblical perspective. And even though every rock song does not promote such things, it may be wise from a spiritual standpoint to simply leave it alone, because there is a danger of learning to love it all if constantly exposed. Because who's to say that Satan won't be able to win you over to his philosophy through this medium? By beholding and receiving the music, it is possible for us to be changed. Jacob of Liège, who lived in the 14th century, made this comment about the reputation of music in his time. He spoke of it as if describing the character of a man. Music, he said, was originally discreet, seemly, simple, masculine, and of good morals. Have not the moderns rendered it lascivious beyond measure? Whatever secular music we choose to put in our diet, we must always be cognizant of the fact that we can become so bonded with the passion, activities, ideas, hopes, and values which the music encourages until we form a merger with the music, mentally, emotionally, and physically, that we become one. A marriage takes place. Thomas Jefferson described his marriage with music in 7 words. Music, the favorite passion of my soul. For those who compose music, it is of course possible for their music to assume their character and influence others by what they make it express. Once we assimilate the music, it becomes our own, or should I say, we become its own. For it is a law of the human mind that by beholding we become changed, not the music, but us. That which we give our minds to will be that which we become. We behold not only with our eyes, but with our ears as well. We educate the musical taste buds, the brain, by that which we choose to feed upon and digest, just as we educate the taste buds of our tongues for physical food. And so it is possible to train the brain to accept any type of music. Bela Bartok, a composer who studied and incorporated Hungarian peasant music into his compositions, expressed the law of assimilation like this. What is the best way for a composer to reap the full benefits of his studies in peasant music? It is to assimilate the idiom of peasant music so completely that he is able to forget all about it and use it as his musical mother tongue. As Jimi Hendrix once said, my goal is to be one with the music. A merger takes place. We simply must be willing and receptive. Acceptance and assimilation of any music will take its toll on each of us for good or for bad. And so it is with caution that we should indulge, for music can influence and manipulate probably every passion of the human soul, which we must learn to control and gain the victory over before we are allowed to enter into the kingdom of God. Now let's turn our attention to the trend that has taken the Christian community by storm. It has become fashionable to use certain types of well-established secular pop music for religious purposes. This is not a new practice, for recorded history has it dating back as far as the Renaissance era. The popular music that I will refer to originated in this country and is specifically being used to shape and influence the sound and structure of religious music, or is being used as religious music in our country. If you are from another country and viewing this, you may find that you are having the same experience, but with popular music of a different brand. Here is an overview of this practice from different time periods with examples from Europe and America. Prior to the Protestant Reformation of 1517, Catholic church music throughout Europe was known for its beautiful and ornate sounds, including many instruments and various voices singing at once. England had always had a unique sound to its church music as compared to the rest of Europe, sticking closely to its roots. The music played in England Catholic churches included a mix of old traditional sounds in religious music and an intricate blend of styles of elaborate musical patterns and dynamics. Writers of music would compose extremely difficult songs filled with complicated combinations of musical intonation. Many of the songs that were sung in churches were actually borrowed tunes from the secular melodies. and the lyrics to the songs were changed into religious meanings and sung together for worship services. The popular secular songs simply underwent lyrical changes so that the texts were appropriate for church and corresponded to biblical passages. So as we can see, this has been done. This was being done over 500 years ago. As King Solomon said, there is nothing new under the sun. Fast forward to the classical period. Once the driving force in the development of new styles, church music by the middle of the 18th century was valued more for its traditionalism than for innovations, or else simply adopted the current prevailing styles of secular music. As a result, church music of this era has attracted much less attention from performers and scholars than opera or instrumental music. Church composers in Catholic areas conformed to the prevailing secular style, especially that of the theater. A few composers carried on the stile antico tradition of Palestrina or the grand polychordal style of Gabrieli. But for the most part, church musicians took over the musical idioms and genres of opera, using orchestral accompaniment, da capo arias, accompanied recitatives, and choruses to express the sentiments in the text and inspire appropriate feelings in listeners attending services. A list of the leading 18th century Italian church composers would almost be identical with a list of the leading opera composers of the period. Even more than masses and motets, Italian oratorios became almost indistinguishable from operas. An oratorio is basically a sacred form, although you do find secular oratorios. At the same time, some composers, particularly in northern Italy, Austria, and southern Germany, affected a compromise between conservative and modern elements, influenced also by the instrumental symphonic works of the classical period. Also, in current-day classical circles today, someone has decided to initiate what they call the Sacred Aria Project, where famous operatic arias are being reset with sacred words so they can be performed in worship settings and not just on the operatic stage. So don't be surprised when you begin to hear your favorite arias from Rigoletto and Aida being sung for divine worship service as a sacred offering to God. The practice of using choral pieces from operas as sacred anthems in worship settings has been in play for years. Fast forward to the 19th century, the Ash Grove. It's a traditional Welsh folk song whose melody has been set to numerous sets of lyrics. The best-known version was written in English by Thomas Oliphant in the 19th century. The lyrics of the first verse are, "Down yonder green valley, where streamlets meander, when twilight is fading, I pensively rove. Or at the bright noontide, in solitude wonder, amid the dark shades of the lonely ash grove. 'Twas there, while the blackbird was cheerfully singing, I first met my dear one, the joy of my heart. Around us for gladness, the bluebells were ringing. Ah, then little thought I how soon we should part. Still glows the bright sunshine o'er valley and mountain, still warbles the blackbird its note from the tree, still trembles the moonbeam on streamlet and fountain, but what are the beauties of nature to me? With sorrow, deep sorrow, my bosom is laden. All day I go mourning in search of my love. Ye echoes, oh, tell me, where is the sweet maiden? She sleeps 'neath the green turf down by the ash grove." This is the version that I learned either as a music student or a music teacher some years ago. It is in one or two of the songbooks that I own. I have heard it sung on many a vocal jury by students studying classical literature and have taught it to many a student myself. This was the only version of this song that I knew, and I had never heard it in any other setting before. Then one Sabbath morning in church, the hymn of the morning was announced. Hymn 560, Let All Things Now Living. As the pianist began playing, I immediately recognized the melody as The Ash Grove. I then looked at the composer information under the title, and there it was, The Ash Grove, traditional Welsh melody. And as the congregation began to sing, I found myself in a dilemma. I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to sing the secular song for worship, and regardless of what the congregation was singing, I could only hear the secular words that I had taught to so many others. And there is nothing offensive or sensual about this song. This song also has quite a long history in film, video games. It's been used in a number of settings by Beethoven, etc., etc., etc. Several secular versions are in existence. So, this is part of the dilemma. Even in our hymnal, we find a song or songs that have a secular background. This ends part 2. In part 3, we will continue to trace the history of the entrance of popular secular music in the church. If you are interested in this series or in hosting a music seminar, please go to rickylittle.org for information.